Homeless girl shares her only coat with freezing dog. What happens next is unthinkable. On the coldest night of the year, a homeless girl gave her only blanket to a shivering dog, not knowing that a simple act of kindness would lead her back to everything she thought she'd lost: a family, a future, and a reason to believe again. If you've ever felt alone but kept going, this story is for you. Chicago, in the deep clutch of January, did not welcome strangers, or its own. The wind screeched down alleyways like a warning, biting at exposed skin and lashing ice into the faces of anyone unfortunate enough to walk its streets after dark. Snow covered the sidewalks in jagged patches, blackened at the edges by passing tires and forgotten footsteps. The street lamps flickered in weak protest, casting their dim halos over a city frozen in place. Beneath the elevated train tracks near 63rd Street, where cold steel met brick walls covered in faded graffiti, a girl moved through the frost-laced shadows like a figure cut from smoke. Her name was Harper Brooks. 17, shoulders squared against the wind as if defiance alone could keep her warm. She was small-boned, but carried herself with a quiet strength, the kind born not of confidence but of survival. Her skin was a warm walnut brown, dulled slightly by soot and winter, and her hair, thick, coiled tightly into a messy bun, peeked out from under a knit beanie that had seen better days. The olive-green coat wrapped around her was too big, clearly from a man's closet, with a broken zipper and threadbare sleeves. Her jeans were torn at the knees, not by style but by time. Her shoes, mismatched and duct-taped at the soles, made dull, wet sounds with every step. Harper had been on the streets for nearly a year, ever since the apartment she shared with her mother went up in flames. Her mom hadn't made it out. Her father, long estranged and locked away on drug charges, never came. Since then, Harper had lived between shelters, church basements, and unlit corners of the city no one cared to name. She had learned quickly how to disappear, how to walk like she had somewhere to go, how to stare straight ahead so no one asked questions, how to keep quiet until she was alone. That night, the snow had turned to ice, slick and sharp. Harper's fingers had gone numb hours ago. She crossed into an alley behind an abandoned liquor store, looking for a place out of the wind. She knew there was an old shipping container behind the loading dock that sometimes stayed dry if you curled up in the right corner. As she stepped toward it, a low sound caught her ear, a whimper, strained and broken. She stopped, listened. There it was again. Not a cat, not a human, something deeper, sadder. Harper approached the edge of the alley cautiously. Behind a stack of discarded pallets and frozen garbage bags, she saw it. A dog. A large golden retriever, curled into itself like a dropped bundle of fur and ribs. Its coat was matted, dirty, and partially iced over, especially near the tail. One of its front paws was bent at an odd angle, and it trembled violently, eyes half shut, but watching her through a narrow slit of caution and exhaustion. Harper crouched slowly, heart thudding. "Hey there," she said, voice raspy from the cold. "You okay, buddy?" The dog didn't move, but it didn't growl either. It looked at her, really looked, and something inside her shifted. She glanced down at her coat. It barely kept her warm, but she could see it now. This dog wouldn't last the night, not out here, not alone. Cursing under her breath, Harper shrugged out of her jacket and stepped closer. The cold hit her skin like punishment. She knelt, draped the coat gently over the dog's back, and then sat down beside it. The ground stole the warmth from her legs instantly. The dog shifted slightly and let out a small groan, then pressed itself against her hip. "Guess you don't mind sharing," she muttered. She sat there in silence, one hand resting on the dog's head, the other buried in her hoodie pocket. The dog exhaled shakily. Harper's breath clouded the air like smoke. "I'll call you Sonny," she whispered. "Not because you are, but maybe you will be." Far from the frozen alley, on the quieter edges of Hyde Park, Malcolm Hayes sat alone in a kitchen that no longer felt like a home. A former K-9 trainer in his late 50s, Malcolm had the look of a man who'd once been powerful. Broad shoulders, square jaw, hands calloused from decades of discipline and purpose, but now moved as if the air itself was heavier. His hair was more gray than black, pulled back in a short, neat ponytail. His eyes, pale green and deeply lined, rarely looked up from his coffee mug anymore. He had lost his wife, Helen, 2 winters ago to cancer, and shortly after he lost Cooper, his most trusted therapy dog. One night, Cooper had vanished from their backyard during a storm. No sign of struggle, no paw prints past the fence, just gone. The house had grown quiet since. Malcolm no longer trained dogs. The leash hooks remained untouched by the door, and Cooper's bed in the corner was still there, undisturbed, as though Malcolm couldn't bear to remove it. Grief had a way of freezing time. That night, Malcolm sat at the table, flipping through an old notebook of K-9 training logs. He paused at a sketch Helen had made of Cooper's face, ears alert, tongue lolling, the kind of expression that made you believe in kindness. "Where'd you go, boy?" Malcolm murmured into the silence. Back in the alley, Harper leaned her head against the brick wall and closed her eyes. The wind had dulled. Sonny, though still trembling, had stopped shivering so violently. She wrapped her arms around herself and listened to the steady rhythm of his breath. For now, for one cold night, neither of them was alone. Morning broke over Chicago in hesitant shades of gray filtering through the iron skeleton of the city, like it wasn't quite sure it belonged. The air was still biting cold, but the snowfall had slowed, and a thin crust of ice formed over everything. Benches, gutters, newspaper boxes, and the city's tired people who stirred slowly back into motion. Under the overpass, Harper Brooks shifted awake to the sensation of warm breath against her leg. Sonny was still there, his golden coat dulled by dirt but radiant in the pale morning light. He blinked up at her with quiet trust, his ribs still visible but his eyes no longer dull. Harper sat up, hugging her arms against her chest. Her teeth chattered violently. She didn't have a plan, she never really had one, but she knew they had to move. The cold would only worsen once the wind picked up again. She stood slowly, knees cracking, and Sonny struggled upright beside her. He limped on his injured front paw but made no sound of pain. Instead, he leaned gently against her leg, waiting. Harper looked down at him. "Guess we're stuck with each other now, huh?" They made their way toward one of the busier train stations downtown, Union Station, a place Harper had frequented when she needed warmth and motion. The security guards there weren't always kind, but if you moved around often enough, they usually let you be. Harper walked with her hood low and her pace steady. Sonny trotted beside her, limping but alert ears perked at every passing sound. Several people glanced at them but quickly looked away. A girl of 17 with a worn-out dog didn't invite attention, and she knew better than to ask for it. By mid-morning, they had found a dry patch of ground just outside the terminal. Harper sat against a steel column, unpacked her crumpled paper bag, and offered half-a-day-old bagel she'd scavenged the night before. She tore it in two, handing the larger piece to Sonny. He sniffed it, then looked at her as if waiting for permission. "Go ahead," she said with a tired smile. "You've earned it." He ate delicately with small, careful bites. It wasn't just hunger she saw in him. It was gratitude. While the station bustled behind them, commuters in coats, mothers tugging children, businessmen on phones. Harper began to hum softly. It was a habit she had held on to from childhood. Her mother used to hum spirituals while washing dishes or folding laundry songs about rivers and redemption and God's quiet mercy. Harper didn't believe in much anymore, but humming made the silence less sharp. A man stopped nearby, tossing a few coins into an empty coffee cup beside her. He was tall and lean, wearing a Cubs beanie and a face that said he hadn't slept well in years. "Nice voice," he muttered, barely making eye contact. You ever think of singing somewhere Harper didn't respond? People like him didn't expect answers. Sonny, sensing her discomfort, moved slightly closer and sat with his back pressed to hers, his body acting like a shield. That moment, small and quiet as it was, became part of a different story, one unfolding several neighborhoods away. In a modest townhouse filled with morning shadows and the smell of reheated coffee, Malcolm Hayes sat hunched over his kitchen table, squinting at his phone. He wasn't one for social media, but Ramona Caldwell had sent him a link via text the night before. "You need to see this," she had written. It was a video grainy vertical and taken from a subway platform. It showed a girl young and hunched over singing something soft and mournful while a dirty golden retriever lay beside her. The video was under a minute captioned only, "This voice and this dog." Why is no one helping them? Malcolm had watched it 4 times already. He stared now at the dog's posture, at the way it kept glancing at the girl as if tethered to her soul. He noted the injured paw, the coat still gleaming despite the filth and the strange serenity in the animal's eyes. For a second, just one, he had hoped. But that hope faded as quickly as it came. The dog in the video was too young, its frame was leaner, and most importantly, its eyes lacked the stormy intensity that had defined Cooper. Still, something about the way the dog leaned into the girl, the way it waited for her to move before doing anything, it felt familiar. It reminded him not of a specific dog, but of a connection, of what he once had. Malcolm rubbed the back of his neck, then stood and poured himself another cup of coffee. His kitchen was simple sunflower curtains, clean countertops, and a breakfast table littered with unopened mail. A photo of Helen, his late wife, rested on the windowsill. She had been a middle school art teacher, all freckles, and fire always trying to convince him to paint instead of bark commands. Malcolm had trained hundreds of dogs over his career, but it had been Helen who taught him how to read the soul behind their eyes. He looked at her photo now and whispered, "You'd tell me to go find that girl, wouldn't you?" He picked up the phone again and saved the video. Back near Union Station, Harper and Sonny had moved to a more discreet corner near the platform's edge. The wind had picked up and she buried her hands into the pockets of her hoodie. Sonny rested his head on her thigh, sighing deeply as if this brief moment of stillness was worth treasuring. A woman passed by with a stroller, pausing to glance down. "That's a beautiful dog," she said gently. Harper nodded without looking up. Compliments didn't feed bellies. But something in the woman's voice hadn't been pity. It had been acknowledgement. Later, when the crowds thinned, Harper sang again, not loudly, but just enough to let her voice wrap around the shadows. Sonny remained perfectly still beside her, his ears twitching at the smallest sound. A man walking by dropped $1 into her coffee cup. Another offered a wrapped granola bar. One woman, young in scrubs, paused, squatted down, and asked softly, "What's his name?" "Sonny Harper," answered. The woman smiled. "He suits it." As the sky dimmed toward late afternoon, Harper leaned back, watching her breath curl in the air. She reached down and scratched behind Sonny's ear. "I don't know where we're going," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I hope it's somewhere warm." Sonny nudged her hand in return, and Harper allowed herself just for a second to believe that maybe warmth wasn't just a place but something you could carry with you. The sun hovered low behind a thick sheet of clouds as another day unfolded in the heart of Chicago. The gray tones of winter bled into everything: steel beams, brick facades, even the faces of people who moved through the station like ghosts. Harper Brooks sat cross-legged on the concrete just outside the Union Station's eastern entrance, her back pressed against a vending machine plastered with peeling ads. Her cheeks were raw from the wind, and her fingers curled tight around the handle of a styrofoam coffee cup. Not for warmth, there was none but to hold the few coins and crumpled dollar bills that passers-by occasionally dropped. Sonny lay at her feet, head resting on his paws, his golden coat cleaner than it had been days before but still dulled by soot and slush. His injured paw had started to heal. Harper had found some antibiotic cream in a community center's free box and applied it as gently as she could. He didn't whimper anymore, though he still limped. His eyes followed every motion around them, a child skipping by a man with too many bags, a pair of pigeons strutting near a sandwich crust. Alert, aware, protective. Harper cleared her throat. She had learned to sing softly here, not loud enough to draw attention from security, but just enough to catch ears. Her voice husky with cold but smooth as velvet rose in careful verses of Wayfaring Stranger, the notes floating like steam into the city noise. She didn't sing to impress. She sang to survive. Sometimes the right melody opened wallets. More importantly, it gave her something to hold on to. From across the plaza, a woman stood watching. She was in her mid-50s, tall and slim, her silver-gray hair pulled into a low bun beneath a wide-collared wool coat. Her face bore the kind of elegant strength that came from a lifetime of choosing compassion in hard places, high cheekbones, thin lips, soft lines around eyes that missed nothing. Her name was Ramona Caldwell, and she was the director of the Midwest Center for Canine Therapy, a quiet but respected facility located just outside the city in Oak Park. A former vet tech turned animal behaviorist, Ramona had a reputation for seeing potential where others saw brokenness both in dogs and in people. She watched Harper for several minutes, not moving, not speaking. She studied the way the girl swayed slightly with the rhythm of her song, how she glanced protectively at the dog each time someone walked too close. Sonny, too, caught her attention. The posture, the patience, the stillness that wasn't fear but something closer to discipline. He wasn't just any stray. That dog had been trained once well. Ramona stepped forward, approaching slowly. Harper saw her coming and went quiet, tensing slightly. Sonny lifted his head but didn't growl. Instead, he gave a low wag of his tail just once and then rested his chin again. Ramona crouched down with careful grace, not too close hands resting on her knees. "That's a beautiful voice," she said gently, her tone professional but warm. "You sing like someone who's lived through a lot." Harper studied her warily. She had met enough outreach workers and pitying strangers to know when someone wanted something. "I'm not begging," she said, tone flat. "I didn't say you were." Ramona smiled, tilting her head. "What's his name, Sonny?" Harper's voice softened. "He suits it," Ramona replied. "I'm Ramona." Harper didn't offer her name. Ramona reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a business card, and placed it carefully near the coffee cup. "I run a place just outside the city. We train therapy dogs. Sometimes we help people too. No pressure, no expectations. Just if you ever need somewhere warm." She stood, nodded at Sonny, and walked away. Harper didn't pick up the card until 10 minutes later. She didn't throw it away. That evening, in a modest office filled with dog leashes, framed certificates, and soft jazz playing through a dusty speaker, Ramona sat behind her desk, video paused on her computer screen. It was the same clip from before Harper singing under the station light, Sonny at her feet. She hit play again, watching frame by frame, pausing at Sonny's raised head and calm, steady eyes. Her office door creaked open and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside. He wore a worn brown coat, faded jeans, and a look of restrained expectation. Malcolm Hayes, 58. Once a pillar in the canine training world, now stood slightly hunched from years of emotional weight more than physical labor. His eyes, pale green and ringed with fatigue, scanned the screen before even greeting her. "Well?" he asked. Ramona turned the monitor toward him. "That's the dog. And the girl." Malcolm stepped closer. "Does it look like Cooper to you?" Ramona was quiet for a moment. "The build's close. Coat too. But the eyes—" "No." Cooper had sharper features. More muscle in the back legs. This one's younger. Maybe 4. Cooper would be 7 now. Malcolm exhaled, stepping back, one hand resting on the back of his neck. "I thought, maybe—" "I understand," Ramona said gently. "I wanted to believe too." Malcolm nodded more to himself than her. "What about the girl?" "She's cautious," Ramona said. "But there's fire in her. And she's kind. She shared her coat with that dog. I saw them yesterday. After she helped him through a crowd, he stayed glued to her side the whole time. Not panicked. Focused. She trained him, I doubt it. But I think someone did. That dog has canine manners. I wouldn't be surprised if he used to be in a program, or belonged to someone who was." Malcolm looked at the paused video again. "What's her name?" She didn't say. He sighed. "You gonna try again?" Ramona leaned back in her chair. "She's on edge. I'll let her come to me." She took the card. "That's a start." Malcolm gave a short nod, then turned to go. "Let me know if anything changes." At the door, Ramona called softly. "You doing okay, Mal?" He didn't turn. "I will be." Later that night, Harper and Sonny sat on a metal grate near the rear of a laundromat that vented warm air from its dryers. Sonny's head rested in her lap as she absent-mindedly ran her fingers through his coat. The business card sat folded in her pocket. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, someone had seen her not as a problem to be solved or a shadow to avoid, but as a person. That didn't change everything, but it was something, and something was more than nothing. Chicago's wind that night didn't whisper, it howled. It tore through alleyways and curled beneath coats, finding every unguarded inch of skin like it had a score to settle. Snow fell sideways under the amber glow of flickering street lamps, blurring the edges of the world. Harper Brooks moved quickly, clutching a plastic grocery bag against her chest, its contents rattling a stale sandwich, a wool scarf missing one end, and a nearly empty water bottle. Her breath came in shallow clouds, her body tense from exhaustion and something deeper unease. Beside her, Sonny trotted quietly, his limp more noticeable after the long day. His coat had darkened from snow and grime, but his spirit remained steady. Ears alert, tail low, he kept to Harper's left, always between her and the street. Harper had planned to sleep near the laundromat again on the metal vent that puffed out warm, drier air through the night. But when they arrived, 2 older men already occupied the spot, both wrapped in sleeping bags, eyes closed but fists tight around their belongings. Harper didn't blame them. Out here, survival was a silent contest of priority. "Come on, we'll find another place," she muttered to Sonny, who gave no protest, only stayed close as they turned down a side alley. The snow deepened here, less trodden, the kind that whispered danger in every footstep. Harper spotted a recessed service doorway behind an old deli half shielded from the wind dry enough. She knelt, brushing aside a heap of papers to create space, then laid down a flattened cardboard box as insulation. "It's not much," she whispered, "but at least it's quiet." Sonny circled once, then lay down beside her, his body against hers. Harper pulled the scarf around her neck and let her eyes close. Just for a moment. Just long enough to forget she didn't belong to any place anymore. But the silence didn't last. Footsteps. Heavy. Purposeful. She opened her eyes, heart already racing. 3 figures emerged from the mouth of the alley. Young men, maybe late teens or early 20s, bundled in patchwork coats and layered hoodies, their eyes sharp with desperation. The tallest walked in front, his hood casting a shadow over a long, narrow face, marked by a thin scar running from temple to jaw. The second one had a nervous twitch adjusting his cap every few seconds. The third, shorter, broader, walked with a slight limp. "Well, what do we have here?" the tall one said, his voice low and almost amused. Harper stood, bag clutched to her chest. "I'm not looking for trouble." The twitchy one laughed. "Too bad. Trouble's looking for you." Sonny growled a low, guttural warning. He stepped in front of Harper, his body rigid, head low, his lips curled just slightly. "Call off the mutt," Scarface sneered. "Or I will." "Please," Harper said, her voice shaking. "I don't have anything." "You sang all day?" the broad one replied. "We saw you. We want what you made. I don't have cash." She backed against the wall. Twitchy lunged first, grabbing for her bag. Sonny sprang before Harper could blink. His body hit the man's legs with full force, knocking him sideways into the snow. Sonny snarled a deep, primal sound that echoed off brick. Twitchy screamed as sharp teeth sank into his jacket sleeve. "Get him off me!" the broad one shouted, raising a boot. "No!" Harper screamed, but it was too late. The boot connected with Sonny's ribs. A sharp yelp pierced the air. He stumbled but didn't retreat. Instead, he turned, growling louder, baring his teeth with such fury that the broad one took a step back. Scarface pulled a piece of metal pipe from his jacket. "Last chance." Before he could swing, a blinding flashlight beam cut through the alley. "Hey!" a commanding voice rang out. "Back off!" The attackers turned. Ramona Caldwell stood at the alley's edge, her coat flapping, flashlight in one hand and phone in the other. "Police are on their way," she said coolly. "You've got 30 seconds to disappear." The boys hesitated, weighing their chances. Then, without a word, they scattered into the snow, leaving behind footprints and adrenaline. Harper collapsed to her knees beside Sonny. He was panting, hard, side-heaving. She ran her hands down his body, feeling for broken bones, her breath caught between sobs. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, I didn't know." She buried her face into his fur. He whimpered but licked her cheek in return. Ramona approached slowly, her expression unreadable beneath the sharp planes of her face. Her silver hair was damp with snow, her gloved hand extended. "He needs a vet." Harper didn't answer. She couldn't look up. Ramona knelt beside them, her voice softer now. "There's a free clinic. I know the vet. She's good and kind. Let me help you. Please." Harper finally raised her eyes. She saw something in the woman's face that she hadn't seen in years' steadiness. No pity, no judgment. Just presence. 20 minutes later, they were inside the back entrance of the Lakeshore Street Animal Clinic. It smelled like antiseptic and lavender. A woman in her 30s, Dr. Lena Park, Korean-American petite, with clear glasses and a confident stride, ushered Sonny onto the exam table with practiced calm. "He's bruised maybe a cracked rib," Lena said after the checkup, "but no internal bleeding. He's a tough one." Harper hovered nearby, clutching a borrowed blanket around her shoulders. Ramona sat beside her, explaining quietly how the clinic helped the city's homeless pet owners, how this wasn't charity, it was community. Lena smiled at Harper. "You've been taking good care of him." "I tried," Harper whispered. Sonny, tail thumping faintly, let out a sigh and rested his head on Harper's thigh. Outside, the snow had begun to slow. Street lamps cast long shadows across slick pavement. Ramona handed Harper a thermos. "Hot cider. I keep a stash in the clinic's break room for emergencies. This counts." Harper held it with both hands, absorbing the warmth. "Why are you helping me?" Ramona looked ahead. "Because I've met people who didn't, and I decided I'd never be one of them." A silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Ramona added, "There's someone I think you should meet. His name's Malcolm Hayes. He used to train dogs. I think he'd see what I see in you." Harper frowned. "I'm not special." Ramona smiled, then gestured to Sonny, now resting peacefully under a blanket. "Tell him that." The morning light filtered through the frosted windows of Lakeshore Street Animal Clinic, soft and golden, cutting through the antiseptic white of the exam room like a gentle reassurance that maybe for once things were going to be okay. Harper sat on the edge of a vinyl chair, shoulders wrapped in a donated flannel blanket, one foot tapping the floor restlessly. Beside her, Sonny dozed on a padded mat, his breath slow and even, a small shaved patch on his rib cage where the vet had treated the bruising from the night before. Harper kept glancing at the door, unsure whether to run or wait. Something about the way Ramona had said, "He might understand you," more than anyone had lodged in her gut. She didn't like strangers, especially older men. Experience had taught her they noticed for the wrong reasons or looked away when they should have helped. But Ramona had not just helped, she had seen her. That meant something. The door opened with a soft jingle. The man who stepped in was tall, broad, and carried the weight of memory in every line of his face. His name was Malcolm Hayes, and at 58 he looked like a man who had both trained greatness and buried it. His beard was salt and pepper trimmed but rugged, and his green eyes, ringed with tiredness, were the kind that studied without judgment. He wore a navy field jacket, jeans, and boots dusted with the city's salt and snow. His hands were calloused yet gentle-looking dogman hands. Harper stood slowly, not out of politeness, but instinct. Malcolm's eyes didn't go to her first. They went to the dog. Sonny had raised his head the moment the man walked in, not in fear, but with an eerie familiarity. His ears perked, his body stiffened like a soldier recognizing a command, but then relaxed just as quickly. Then, without warning, he stood limped once and padded forward. Harper's heart jumped. "Sonny, wait." But Sonny didn't bark or growl. He simply approached Malcolm with cautious reverence, tail wagging gently as if some distant thread had pulled him toward this man with quiet certainty. Malcolm crouched slowly. Sonny sniffed his hand, then pressed his head into the man's palm. Harper froze. Her throat tightened. Was he going to claim him? Was this the moment she lost everything again? "Easy, boy," Malcolm murmured, running his hand along Sonny's back. "You've been through it, haven't you?" Then his fingers found something just above Sonny's left leg, a faint, healed-over scar. Malcolm exhaled slowly. Ramona, leaning against the doorframe behind them, spoke. "It's not Cooper." "I know," Malcolm said, voice low. Cooper's scar was on the right near the flank. This one's older, deeper. Different dog. He looked up at Harper. She stood, rooted arms crossed tightly over her chest, gaze defensive but trembling. "I'm not here to take him," Malcolm said gently. Harper didn't answer, but her shoulders lowered just slightly. "I used to train dogs like him," he continued. "He's special. I can see that. And so can you." Sonny trotted back to her side, brushing his body against her knee like a living anchor. Harper reached down, stroking his ears. "He saved my life," she muttered. Malcolm nodded. "Looks like he'd do it again." There was a pause. The kind that stretches when people are figuring out whether trust has space to grow. Ramona stepped forward. "Malcolm has room at his place, lots of it. I was thinking, maybe Harper and Sonny could stay there for a bit, just until we figure out next steps." Harper stiffened again. "Not as charity," Ramona added. "As a partnership. You help Malcolm around the property, learn from him. He trains dogs. You've got instincts. I think you'd surprise yourself." Malcolm watched her carefully. "Your call. You're not a case. You're a person. And you and that dog, you've already done more than most." Harper didn't reply, but she looked down at Sonny, who sat calmly at her feet, gazing up at her with those steady brown eyes. Later that day, a black pickup pulled up in front of a modest two-story house, nestled near the edge of an overgrown park on the city's western edge. The siding was old but intact, the porch neatly swept, and wind chimes sang in the breeze, clinking like distant laughter. Malcolm opened the passenger door and let Harper step down, Sunny leaping beside her. She glanced up at the home, unsure. "This is your place." "Yup. House is bigger than I need," Malcolm said, grabbing a duffel of blankets Ramona had packed for them. "You'll stay upstairs. There's a spare bedroom. Bathrooms down the hall. Sunny's welcome inside. Always." They walked into a living room lined with books, framed photos, and most noticeably a series of ribbons and certificates hanging above the mantel. A younger Malcolm beamed in one standing beside a gleaming golden retriever with a sharp expression Cooper. Harper studied the photo. "He looks like Sunny," she said. Malcolm smiled a bit wistfully. "Yeah, but they're not the same. Cooper was intense, focused. Sunny, he's got something softer, like he was made to protect someone's heart, not just their body." Harper didn't know what to say, but the words stayed with her. That night she lay in the upstairs bedroom on a real bed for the first time in months. Sunny curled beside her, his tail thumping once before stilling. Through the window she saw snowflakes beginning to fall again, but this time she wasn't afraid. This time there were walls, a roof, and someone downstairs who didn't look at her like a burden. She whispered into the dark hand resting on Sunny's back. "We're not lost anymore. Not really." Sunny stirred in his sleep and nudged closer. The snow had slowed to a hush outside the windows of Malcolm Hayes's house, blanketing the yard in a soft white that muffled every sound but the creak of old floorboards and the occasional distant bark from a neighbor's dog. Inside, warmth bloomed from the fireplace in the living room, where logs crackled softly beneath a brass mantel. Harper Brooks sat curled on the edge of the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, a mug of lukewarm tea cradled in her palms. Sunny lay at her feet, head resting on one paw, the firelight dancing across his golden fur. It had been 2 days since she and Sunny moved in. The guest room upstairs was modest but clean, with soft sheets, a patchwork quilt, and a small lamp shaped like a lighthouse. There was a closet half filled with old coats that still smelled faintly of cedar, and a dusty bookshelf holding dog-eared copies of novels by Toni Morrison and Steinbeck. Malcolm hadn't hovered. He had shown her where the towels were, how to work the shower, and where the cereal was stored, then let her find her rhythm. Harper appreciated the space. Trust was like frostbite. It took a long time to thaw. That afternoon, Malcolm had gone into the garage to sort through supplies. Harper wandered. She hadn't explored the house much, but something about the silence invited her deeper. She found herself standing before a closed door off the hallway. It was slightly ajar, revealing the edge of a lace curtain and warm wood panels. Inside was a room drenched in soft gold light, and at the center of it a piano. It was an upright Baldwin old, but well cared for, its finish polished to a warm honey sheen. A vase of silk flowers rested atop it, along with a framed photo of a woman with auburn curls and a laugh caught mid-motion. Harper stepped inside as if in a trance, her fingertips brushing the keys. She hadn't played in years, but some things lived in the bones. She sat down and pressed a key. Then another. A few sour notes at first, her fingers stiff with disuse. But then came a progression minor, slow, mournful. It was an old gospel hymn, something her mother had played on their thrift store keyboard back when their living room was still full of life and music and weekend breakfasts. She played tentatively at first, then more boldly, the melody pulling something loose inside her chest. Halfway through, her hands trembled. By the final notes, she was crying. Silent tears falling freely down her cheeks, her shoulders hunched as if trying to fold into herself. Sunny had come in quietly, nudging her knee before settling beside her feet again like a shadow. What Harper didn't know was that Malcolm stood in the hallway, the door just slightly cracked, listening. He hadn't heard that hymn in years. His wife Helen had played it often on Sunday mornings and rainy days, sometimes after funerals when silence was too heavy. The sound now coming from Harper's hands wasn't just a melody. It was memory and loss, and maybe something trying to grow in its place. When the last note faded, Malcolm quietly stepped away and returned to the garage. Some moments weren't meant to be interrupted. Later that evening, Harper found him in the kitchen chopping sweet potatoes with methodical calm. The room smelled of rosemary and olive oil. "You play?" he asked, without looking up. Harper paused. "I used to. Not for a while." She would have liked that. Helen. That was her room. Harper nodded, but said nothing. Malcolm glanced at her, then back at the cutting board. "Music's good. Makes the walls feel less empty." The next morning, Harper was out back tossing a ball for Sunny in the snow-covered yard. Despite his limp, Sunny chased it with a joyful energy, kicking up flurries as he bounded across the space. Malcolm watched from the porch, arms crossed, a smile tugging the corner of his mouth. "Ever notice how he watches you?" Malcolm said when Harper returned with Sunny at her side. "What do you mean? He waits for your cues. Keeps his body between you and any door. That's not just loyalty. That's training therapy dog instinct." Harper looked down at Sunny. "He just knows what I need." Malcolm nodded. "Exactly." He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket and dialed. A moment later, Ramona's warm voice came through. "I think I've got something," he said. "Harper. She's not just a survivor. She's got touch, natural understanding. And Sunny, he's special. I think we ought to give them a real shot." Ramona agreed. She offered a position in informal apprenticeship training Harper to become a canine therapy assistant at the center. They'd start with basics, handling commands, reading canine behavior, shadowing real therapy sessions. It wasn't a job. Not yet. But it was a path. When Malcolm told Harper that evening, she was quiet. Then she said, "Do you think I can really do it?" "I think you already are," he replied. That night, Harper returned to the music room and played again. This time a little stronger, a little steadier. Sunny curled up beside the piano bench, and Malcolm listened once more from the hallway, letting the music wrap around him like an old quilt. The days were growing longer in Chicago, the light returning in slow but certain strokes across the skyline. Spring had begun to stretch its fingers through the frost-bitten city, softening the ground and waking the trees with hints of green. On the west edge of town, where the old Hayes home stood with its weathered porch and sun-warmed wood siding, something else was beginning to bloom too. Harper Brooks. At 17, Harper no longer flinched at every knock on the door or shadow on the street. Her braids were tighter now, her clothes cleaner, her eyes less guarded though still watchful. She walked taller, spoke more often, and spent her mornings in classrooms instead of alleys. Malcolm had helped her enroll in a part-time GED program at the Community Learning Center just a short bus ride away. The first day, she had nearly backed out, nerves knotted in her stomach like cold metal. But Sunny had trotted beside her all the way to the bus stop, sitting with perfect calm, his presence saying, "You've got this." She had smiled at him, rubbed his ear, and gone. It turned out Harper wasn't just smart. She was sharp. She asked the right questions, listened carefully, and soaked up knowledge with the hunger of someone who knew how precious opportunity was. She liked science best, especially biology, and her handwriting small, tidy, slanted left-filled notebooks faster than any of her classmates. Meanwhile, Sunny had found his own rhythm. 3 days a week he joined Harper at the Midwest Center for Canine Therapy, now not just as her companion but as a budding therapy dog. Ramona Caldwell, ever composed in her tailored vests and silk scarves, had assigned them to the senior companionship program, visiting assisted living homes and memory care centers. Their first assignment had been Willowbrook Residence, a red brick building with ivy climbing the walls and window boxes bursting with petunias. Sonny had padded through the entrance like he belonged there, tongue-lolling, tail gently wagging. Inside the residence, many in wheelchairs or with hands twisted by arthritis, lit up like candles at his approach. One woman in particular, Mrs. Bernice Clary, became Harper's favorite. Bernice was in her early 80s, slender as a crane with snow-white hair always pulled back into a bun. Her voice still held traces of her Tennessee roots, and though her memory flickered in and out, her sense of humor never dimmed. "Them eyes," she'd said the first time she saw Sonny. "He's got preacher eyes. Knows your heart before you speak." Harper laughed. "Yeah, he's good like that." Bernice would often ask Harper to sing for her. Something soft, she'd say. Something you ain't afraid to feel. And Harper did. Sometimes Amazing Grace, sometimes Bill Withers. And every time she sang, Sonny lay at her feet, still as a statue, his head resting on Bernice's slippered foot. Ramona watched it all with quiet satisfaction. One afternoon she pulled Harper aside. "You're doing real work," she said. "You're helping people heal just by being there." Harper looked down, modest. "Feels like I'm just being normal. That's the magic of it." Word spread. A local news reporter, Jasmine Soto, mid-30s Latina, always with a notebook tucked in her back pocket, came by to write a piece on the therapy center. She interviewed Harper and followed them to Willowbrook for a session. The article ran a week later with the headline, "From Streetlight to Spotlight, Teen and Her Dog Bring Healing to Chicago Seniors." The story went viral. Not the flashy, exploitative kind, but the quiet kind that made people stop scrolling and wipe their eyes. The center received donations calls and offers. One woman sent a hand-knitted dog vest with Sonny stitched across the back. Harper cried when she opened it. Then came the day Malcolm had been quietly working toward. One afternoon, Harper returned home from school to find Malcolm in the garage sanding a plank of wood. He wore his usual canvas apron and old ball-cap sawdust in his beard. She watched as he etched letters with a hand-carving tool, carefully and deliberately. "What's it say?" she asked. He turned the wood so she could read Sonny's light center. Her breath caught. Malcolm cleared his throat. "I've been thinking. This place. It doesn't have to just be a house. It can be more. A place where people and dogs find their way again. What you and Sonny have. It should keep going. Help others." Harper ran her fingers across the carved words. "It's perfect." He looked at her, suddenly more serious. "And I've got one more thing to ask you." She glanced up. "I'd like to make it official," he said. "Adopt you. If you'll let me. I know I came late, but I want to stay." Her voice broke. "You sure you want a mouthy, stubborn used-to-be runaway?" He smiled. "Only if she still plays gospel in the evenings." She threw her arms around him. That evening, Harper and Malcolm mounted the wooden sign to the fence post at the front of the property. The sun dipped behind the house, casting the words in golden light. Sonny barked once, then sat proudly beneath the sign as if he understood its meaning. The evening air in Chicago was warm, touched with that rare kind of breeze that carried the promise of change. Inside the modest auditorium of the Community Learning Center, folding chairs lined every row, and the scent of carnations and printed paper programs floated in the air. On the far side of the room, sunlight poured in through tall windows, gilding the stage in a soft amber hue. Tonight was the spring graduation ceremony, and Harper Brooks, once just another forgotten face on a freezing street corner, was about to walk across the stage, head high, eyes clear, a melody burning in her heart. The audience was modest but full of warmth. Teachers, parents, caseworkers, and a few who had no obligation to be there except that they cared. In the front row sat Malcolm Hayes, dressed in his cleanest flannel shirt and slacks, his posture upright, but hands trembling slightly. In his lap rested a simple wooden picture frame, the photo inside aged but well kept. Cooper, his old partner tongue out and eyes bright, standing beside a younger Malcolm and Helen. Beside him, lying peacefully, was Sonny. He wore his therapy vest, but not the usual one. Tonight he had on a special sash, deep navy blue with golden embroidery that read, "Sonny's Light, Guardian and Guide." His muzzle had begun to lighten slightly with age, but his posture was proud ears alert, as if he knew this moment mattered. Backstage, Harper paced quietly, guitar in hand. Her fingers ran over the polished wood, the instrument a gift from one of the elderly residents at Willowbrook. Mrs. Clary now passed, but never forgotten. The guitar had been hers in the 1960s, painted with soft floral designs and names of favorite hymns. It had become Harper's treasured possession. Harper wore a simple cream dress and brown boots. Her hair was styled in a neat bun with a single braid hanging down her shoulder. A silver chain, a locket Malcolm had given her the day she received her GED diploma, glinted under the stage lights. When her name was announced, the room erupted in applause, not just polite, but heartfelt. She stepped into the spotlight and sat on the small stool at center stage. She adjusted the mic, cleared her throat, and took a breath that reached back through every cold night, every scar, every goodbye she hadn't had the chance to say. This song, she began, her voice steady, is for those who've walked in the dark so long they forgot the light was real. It's for those who stayed, and for those who led me home. She began to play. The song was called Where the Light Begins. It was a slow, melodic tribute, part folk, part gospel, part something entirely her own. Her voice rose and fell with the kind of emotion that couldn't be faked. There were verses about street corners and songs sung to no one, about golden eyes that never looked away, about firelight in an old man's kitchen and the sound of music behind closed doors. When she reached the final chorus, her voice faltered slightly, but it wasn't from nerves. It was the way her eyes locked on Malcolm in the front row, who had bowed his head, the photo frame of Cooper now held against his heart. And beside him, sunny eyes, glistening, head tilted, tail thumping once, as if keeping rhythm. The final chord rang out and fell into silence. Then the room erupted again. Harper stood, gave a small nod, and smiled, genuine and quiet. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the room thinned to scattered laughter and embraces, Harper sat with Malcolm and Sonny near the front steps. She leaned her head against Malcolm's shoulder. Neither of them spoke for a while. He finally broke the silence. "You think Cooper heard it?" She smiled. "I think he never stopped listening." From that moment forward, the name Sonny's Light took on new life. Within the year, the property on the west side of town had been transformed. What was once a house and a backyard had become a haven. The front yard held a small painted sign, "Therapy Dog Training," "Music for Healing," "Community Shelter." Children ran in the yard, some orphaned, some from foster systems, most with stories as fractured as Harper's once was. Inside, Harper taught group music therapy 3 times a week, guiding small hands over piano keys or teaching chords to teens who hadn't touched a guitar before. Her classroom echoed with laughter and hope. In the back lot, a second building had been raised with the help of local donations and volunteers. It held kennels, training rooms, and quiet spaces for rescues. Harper worked closely with Ramona, now semi-retired but still sharp and commanding, who often dropped by with tea and advice. Sonny remained Harper's shadow, older now, slower, but no less attuned. Even as he began to gray around the muzzle, he carried himself with dignity, his eyes still searching the room for those in need. And he always found them. Children who'd never had a family curled up with him during thunderstorms. Veterans sat silently with a hand on his back. Elderly clients at outreach events smiled wider when he walked in the door. And at night, when the house finally quieted, Harper would sit by the piano. Sometimes she played for herself, sometimes for Sonny. Always softly, always gratefully. She had once thought the world had no place for her. but now she had built one from broken pieces, from songs from fur and trust and time. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or lightning. They come quietly wrapped in kindness, carried on 4 legs, and placed gently into the life of someone who has forgotten what it means to be seen. Harper's story reminds us that no one is too broken to heal, and no heart is too lost to find home again. In the darkest corners of her life, it was not riches, fame, or power that saved her. It was love. The selfless love of a dog who refused to give up. The steadfast love of a man who chose to open his home. And above all, the quiet grace of a God who sees the invisible and turns forgotten lives into testimonies. When we reach out with compassion, when we offer warmth to someone shivering in their own silence, we become part of that divine plan. We become the light. So today, let Harper's journey be a reminder that miracles still happen, that second chances are real, that sometimes God sends angels in fur with wagging tails and eyes that say you are not alone, are not. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave a comment and tell us how kindness changed your life. Subscribe for more stories where love overcomes darkness. And if you believe in the power of grace, type Amen in the comments below. May God bless all those who are searching for light. May He guide your steps, calm your storms, and place a sunny by your side when you need it most.